Welcome to the Build on Beauty podcast, where beauty is born skin deep. Now, here's your host, author, speaker, entrepreneur, Cornell Jermaine.
Thank you for joining me. I have a special guest with me. He is a proud native of Florence, Alabama, a graduate of Emory University and a Marshall Scholar. He holds 2 master's degrees, one from Queen Mary University of London and one from the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. He's been featured in hit television shows such as Law and Order SVU and Madam Secretary, and is currently starring in the hit Broadway presentation Tina, the story of Tina Turner. As a recording artist, producer, and former husband of Tina Turner, Ike Turner. He is an actor, singer, poet, playwright, scholar, and a proud Black man. Please help me welcome to the show, Mr. Garrett Turner. Garrett, how are you, sir?
Wow, I'm doing a lot better after that intro. I'm feeling special.
Like you're feeling accomplished and all that good stuff, right?
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Well, you are, sir. I just took notes from your bio. Listen, this is stuff you've done. Sometimes we have to hear it to know, like, wow, I've done all that. You've done it, sir, and are yet doing it. So congratulations. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you. Hey, by God's grace, for sure.
Yes, sir. So you are, as we said, in Tina, which is the hit Broadway musical about the life and times of Tina Turner, the queen of rock and soul. And we want to talk about your role as Ike Turner, her husband. But first, I want to get into your start, your beginning into this whole industry of entertainment. When did you know that you were born for this, if you will?
Great question. Not for a while. I think in terms of a lot of artists, I would be a late bloomer, as it were. So I was always singing, right? I grew up singing in church in Florence, Alabama, my hometown. And it was beautiful. Actually, I went to a Christian group that sings a cappella without any instruments.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was really like learning to listen and learning to harmonize even then in church, you know. So I knew I loved that. And then in high school, I was like co-president of show choir, you know. I did that. I didn't do a play or a musical until my senior year, because every senior class would do like a senior year show. And so my senior year, I played Templeton in Charlotte's Web. Classic, you know, good times. And I remember getting exit applause one time when I like slinked off stage, you know, and that felt really good. But even then, I wasn't thinking about it as a career because I just had no real clue of how one went about that, or even like the penchant to sort of think of pursuing it, right? Because there was no one around me who was doing that for a career. So yeah, so it was really after I finished undergrad that I really started to think about it seriously as a career. Like I double majored in music and creative writing in undergrad, but mostly just because I liked those things, you know, and I wanted to learn more about them. It wasn't a career-minded choice. And even when I was like finishing, I was saying in applications for scholarships and stuff that I was going to be a professor, because honestly, that just felt like it was more sane of a decision. But then when I got to grad school and those degrees you were just mentioning, that's when essentially God opened the door and I was like, all right, I got to do this thing.
So you said professor, and obviously you just went through that. Entertainment was kind of like not even on your radar. Were you leaning more into education, more into academia then? Was that more of your passion growing up?
Well, it's certainly a passion. I mean, I did 7 years of higher education at 4 different universities with 3 degrees, you know, so I like being a student was a thing that worked for me. And I loved the life of the mind. I loved discussing complex ideas. And I loved like curating that conversation, which I think is a lot of what teaching is, at least when you get to the college level. So that's really what I was leaning towards. Those things that I enjoyed. Not so much the research, not so much the PhD dissertation or the MLA citation. That side of things.
That's a little
I
too
was less
technical.
into.
A lot of
Yeah, but
technicalities there.
honestly, it just felt like a viable option for me to take some of my passions and match them with, uh, a career where I could like live in the same place and have a sustained wage and sort of cling to the middle class stability of my upbringing, if you will.
Yes. So one has to wonder, and I'm sure many of our listeners and viewers are, having such an extensive background in education and now going into the entertainment space. What did your family think when they saw you going down this road versus the road of education, or what some would deem a more promising future?
Yeah, this is the real miracle of my family, because I called my mom, I think it was like halfway through my sophomore year of undergrad, and I was like, "Hey, mom, I'm thinking about a major in playwriting. What do you think about that?" And she was like, "Well, honey, if that's what you want to do, and that's literally always been the energy from my family, my mom, my dad. I have two siblings, older sister, younger brother. Everyone's just been like, "Yeah, Garrett, go for it." Which, I think so many young artists don't enjoy that kind of familial support, which is it's really an incredible sort of foundation and bedrock to what I do.
Yeah, for sure. Does education, do you feel it supports what you do as an entertainer? Does it help at all, having that passion to learn, or the passion of the mind, if you will?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, to me, this is like the field that synthesized all of my different um, passions. By which I mean, so for instance, I, I only did one play in high school. I was just saying. I also only did one play in college. Like the whole time in college, I was singing in an a cappella group, and I was in a couple different choirs, but I wasn't doing theater. Like I wasn't doing musicals or any of that. But my senior year, I wrote a play about Langston Hughes. And essentially, it used his poetry to tell the story of his life, like through his own work. And it was called I Dream a World, the life and work of Langston Hughes. And so for that, like I read all of Langston's published poetry, like every poem he ever published. And I read his autobiography, and I read a biography of his, and I was doing all this research into his life, which obviously, leans towards this sort of academic side of things, and sort of discovering this person's life story in this way. But then I got to apply it, and actually write, because I loved writing. I told you I did creative writing. I wrote mostly poetry and plays. I was also like performing spoken word poetry at like poetry slams across Atlanta and that kind of stuff. So here I am, like writing this play, which it is like told through the performance of poetry. So I got to bring that to bear. There are settings of Hughes's poetry to music, and I put a couple of those in the show. So I like sang some Hughes poems in the show. There was like a jazz pianist who played. There was a cast of 6 of us, and then I got to act out part of this character's life. And it was like, all right, theater can be all of this. I was like, okay, this is lit, So that was really like a sort of open door, that showed me what the industry could be.
Yeah, you mentioned Langston Hughes, and I have to just bring this up because we recently celebrated MLK, and obviously many of us, when we think of Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King, we think of the "I Have a Dream" speech. Obviously, he did way more than that, had way more speeches and talks than that, but that's one that comes to mind for many. And I was thinking about that "I Have a Dream" speech and what his dream was. And then all of a sudden, this Harlem, which was the poem from Langston Hughes, came up to me, and it said, well, what happens to a dream deferred? Because in many instances, we look at Dr. King's passion, dream for humanity, not just Blacks, but humanity, as still unfulfilled. And here in 2023, you know what I mean? So I was thinking, like, what happens to a dream deferred? And, obviously Langston goes through all of these scenarios But I want to pose that question to you because I feel like it still remains, and nobody answered it. When I asked, no one had an answer for me. But what do you think? Like a dream, whether it's a career dream, a dream for humanity, as Dr. King, or any dream, what do you think happens when it's deferred, put off, or not allowed to manifest?
Yeah.
Now, I know that's kind of heavy. I know that's
no. I was
okay.
about to say this is why I was excited to do this podcast, because this is precisely the kind of thing that I want to get into. I mean, Langston put it quite well himself. I'm seeing if I can pull up the poem, because I don't have it off the dome, though I should.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I have it if you want me to go through it.
Oh, I got it right here too. You want to say it though? I like your voice. You
okay.
You give it a read.
Okay. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrup sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode?
I love it. And then if this is the scholar in me. If you're looking at the text, that last sentence, or does it explode, is in italics to make it stick out from the rest as like this harbinger of what's to come. Which, I mean, Langston was a prophet unto himself. So he was talking about the summer of 2020. If you keep an entire demographic of people systemically, I should say, subjugated, discriminated against, and be it in like obvious or subtle ways, the accumulating effect of that builds up over time. And so because really the poem is a series of questions, and the answer is, well, it could be all of those. It's at times it festers like a sore, right? And it's just like sort of cankerous on the body politic, if you will. But it's gonna be a time. It's gonna be a time where it blows up. And I think that's what we saw, in the summer of 2020, and all it really takes is an inciting incident. That's the thing. When it's systemic and people feel it all the time, and we're articulated in different ways, like just the oppression that we're under, and people are denying it. What are you talking about? That's not a thing, right? We're beyond that. What are you talking about? But we're still feeling it. Then when we see a clarion example, all it takes is that one thing to literally set off like the largest global civil rights protests that we've ever seen. And then the question is, what comes from that? How do we take those moments of collective power, right, to affect real sort of solutions, if you will? And we've been meeting that out over the last 3 or so years.
Yeah.
And a lot of different ways. A lot of it has been like white folks in power doing whatever manipulation they can to hold on to their power, while making it seem like that they're actually about the dream when they're not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No. Stay with us. We have a program for you over here, and we're taking training, and we're gonna rename our theater after one of your Black artists. So like, don't get too mad. Like, as long as we can hold on to power, But I mean, dreaming is so essential, I think, to life, because really it's just about like us being able to see things that are not yet, right? Like a new way of being, and that can be for ourselves, it can be societally. And both Hughes and King really tapped into the necessity of that, because it's all about how we vision who we are, who we should be. Again, the we is singular, and the we is communal, right? And then from there, when you can see it, you have to see it first, and then when you can see it, then you can build towards it. I'll leave it out there, because I know there are
very good
ways of talking about that.
You mentioned something and just and I'm going down this rabbit trail, but I'm gonna go because I just feel it led. But you mentioned something about how sometimes our counterparts will pretend sometimes to be about the mission of overall Blacks, and I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, or we're gonna. You mentioned specifically name the theater after one of your celebrities or one of your. And I was just speaking with somebody the other day how I think we should, as a whole, have gotten to the point by now where just putting our name on a marquee or a billboard or should not be enough. You know what I'm saying? Like even back when they were talking about putting and I don't know if they did that or not. You may know, but they were talking about putting Harriet Tubman on the the $20 bill or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was telling people like, that ain't enough for me. Like I mean I can pull her picture up on Google and post it in my house if I want to. That's not enough and I realize what it represents. And yes, it may send a message, but it's not enough. I wonder, what are your thoughts being in entertainment, a space where many times people will flash your names and lights, but behind the scenes things are falling apart, i.e. maybe your contracts and all that kind of stuff, but they don't mind putting your name on the marquee. What do you feel about this whole idea of propping us up almost on a pedestal, but still kicking it from under us behind the scenes? What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, it has so much to do with the Black radical imagination, right? This is why, and just linking back to, this subject of dreaming, it's like, it's like how do we have the audacity to be specific in what it is our people really need? You know what I mean? And how far are we willing to go in envisioning that? Right? Yeah, because I mean, I'll just keep it within my industry, which is it's the entertainment industry writ large, right? But specifically, most of my career thus far has been in the theater, in the American theater. The pinnacle of which is supposedly, ostensibly, is heralded as Broadway, right? This is like where everybody's trying to get. And so the question, like one question that I intentionally put pressure to often is like, what is Broadway? Because of like, if our dream is just to get to Broadway, well then we'll probably be good. Like if they take one of the Broadway theaters and name it after Lena Horne, they're like, oh wow. Like this is real inclusion. Like this is the dream, But then if we take it a step further and we go, okay, what makes Broadway Broadway? Is it really the artists who work there? Is it the shows that happen there? I would say no, because the artists who work on Broadway, I made my Broadway debut in 2021 in a new play called Thoughts of a Colored Man. We also work elsewhere. Before I ever got there, I was working at regional theaters all up and down the East Coast. So like, I am not what makes Broadway Broadway. Hugh Jackman is not what makes Broadway Broadway. Hugh Jackman is also the Wolverine. Hugh Jackman has all these other things going on. So like, what the shows that happen on Broadway, they get done all over. A show doesn't have to go to Broadway to be there. So like, what is Broadway? I would contend the answer is it's a system, right? It's a system of 41 theaters within a few blocks on this one island of New York City, right? And so why are we so desirous of getting there, right? Like this is the thing. This is why we have to use our radical imagination to construct our dreams. Because if we start breaking it down, we go, oh wow, well that's actually quite inequitable, right? If this is one of the only spaces in the American theater where you can say make a living wage as an actor, well then everyone's clamoring to get to this one island, to get in these 41 theaters, which, spoiler alert, are owned exclusively by white folks. Wow. Right? 75% of the theaters are owned by 3 white families. And then you go, oh, well, maybe our dream shouldn't be to like be on Broadway, because then actually what we're doing by participating it or lauding it as this pinnacle is we're just like upholding like these folks who are making this money because they had the leverage and the privilege to colonize the land and to own the theaters back when we couldn't and were pushed out. And so then you go, well, maybe our dream should go beyond. Maybe it should have to do with like Black ownership, or do I want to be the person at the top of the pinnacle owning the things? Like, do I want to be a Black Tyler Perry or a Black Jeff Bezos, a titan of industry, or is that system also kind of corrupt? Like, is there a dream that actually like goes beyond to include all of the people within like the resources without the subjugation? Like, that's what becomes so important, because it's easy to just accept what the white folks give you unless you start to ask the real questions. I think that answers your question.
Indeed. And I was just curious about your thought on that. And I agree wholeheartedly. Our dream has to, you coined it as radical imagination, which I love that. I love that term. Using your radical imagination to dream beyond just what benefits maybe you and your household. You know what I mean?
Hey, preach, Cornell.
So I love that.
That's what I'm talking about.
Listen, so I'm trying to get back to our notes, but I love
Please. Yeah, of course.
No, you're good. So I want to ask this in the same vein, though, of entertainment. Some educated Black folks, I'm going to say educated Black folks, are tough on entertainers, particularly when they're portraying characters they deem as buffoons or participating in shows that they feel highlight the plights of Black people. As a educated Black man in entertainment, do you have those same expectations? And if so, what are they?
Oh, it's all very nuanced. It all depends on the circumstance. Let's take, I don't know, the Tina Turner musical, for instance. So I'm playing Ike Turner, who in many ways is the villain of the story, right? So one could watch the show and go, this seems like an unfavorable portrayal of this Black man. Why are we doing this? Why do we want to do this? Which is not why is a very important question. And the other questions one can raise is like, who wrote this? Who created it? Like who are the minds behind sculpting this vision of Blackness that we are taking in this powerful way on stage? And that in the case of our show, Katori Hall, a Black woman from Memphis, Tennessee, is the writer, Pulitzer Prize winning, by the way, Katori Hall, shout out. Hey. And we have a female director who's this white woman from Britain who's had a long career, Phillida Lloyd, and is just has an incredible vision, when it comes to telling the story on stage. So in my mind, we've got like an amazing team that like places women at the center, which is really necessary for the story of someone like Tina Turner. And then we also have like Black voices like in a real way behind the table thinking about how to tell this story of Black history. Now the why as to Ike being the villain in this case is because in many ways he was, what I mean? Let's not shy away from the truth. What I'm saying? And this is what in a lot of fictional dramas things can get a bit more spurious when it comes to the question of how we portray like Black manhood on stage or on screen, because then it's like, okay, well, someone's just choosing to make this person an abuser or not, or choosing to make this person like a father at home who takes good care of his kids or not, and then it's really important to ask like why those choices are being made and how they're serving the story. But in the purpose of our story, it's real and it's necessary to tell like the true way in which, one, Ike was a musical genius, yes, who made his way out of abject poverty to international acclaim, but also was a sexual predator and serial abuser. But so it always depends on the specifics of the particular project, and the nuance behind it.
You spoke about Ike and his character. I'm wondering, emotionally speaking, does it take a lot for you to get into the the depths and gravity of him as a character on stage?
Yeah, it did take a lot. I referenced that in past tense because while I was building the character, there was a lot of research harkening back to the cross section of academia, and a lot of serious consideration of how he became who he was, right? Nowadays, I think we're like 130 plus shows into the run. So really, I just show up to work. I do a 90-second ritual before the show, and I step on stage and I'm dropped in because I've done the work, right? Leading up to this. So it doesn't take a long time now. But yeah, it was, I mean, again, I read his autobiography. I read a biography about Ike. I read Tina's autobiography, which was fascinating because you're getting the same story from all these different angles. It's a vantage point. And so you start to question, whose narrative do you believe, or how can I get to the truest part of this person? And then the wonderful thing about being an actor in 2023 is YouTube. I could just watch Ike on screen, and rewind and look at his gesticulations and how he was on stage, but also off stage when they were traveling, these home videos and that kind of thing, and listening to his voice, trying to replicate that specifically and find the best way to honor how he spoke. And then it's a meshing together of all of that research with Katori's words and Phillida's direction. You know what I mean? And then of course my own corporeal being, because I am not Ike, but I have to find a way through myself to be as close to him as possible, and that's how the magic of theater really happens. Yeah.
I have to ask, in your research, you say you studied Tina's biography and also Ike's biography. Do you think it was the industry or this fame that really corrupted their relationship as a couple, or was it already shaky to begin with?
Oh, their relationship as a couple was shaky from jump, my friend. It was, and it's because of who they were and how different they were. I mean, like, first there's Tina, who grew up in an abusive household, as of course her own like firebrand of genius, in Nutbush, Tennessee. I was in a lot of ways quelled in that community. Women's voices, Black women's voices are silenced often. And so she went through that. Her mom left her when she was young, and then and as did her dad. So she was raised by her grandmother, and then didn't reconnect with her mom until later on in her teens, and when she moved to St. Louis. But so there's that sort of traumatic, upbringing, as well as just the incredible, like I said, firebrand of a person that she is. And then there's Ike, who also, they underwent abuse when he was young. He was sexually abused, like when he was I think like before he was a teenager, and his dad was essentially lynched. I mean, it took his dad a couple of years to pass away after he was attacked by a white mob. But so that, I mean, there's that. There's just, of course, like being a Black man in the rural South in the 1930s. All of that together, along with this brilliant spark of how he learned to play the piano and the guitar, and started a band, and then started to get to some acclaim in St. Louis. And it was at that moment, when the both of them met, they were like already full of all of this stuff, right? And of course, yeah, and also like love from Gigi, like Tina's grandmother, and the people who loved Ike and taught him how to play and pushed him along the way. So like, just the full complexity of humanness. And so when they met and decided to be together, it was like, yikes, it was like, okay, this something great could come from this, or something terrible could come from this. And both came from it, right? Because Ike just abided by this patriarchal mindset, but Tina could not be held down by that because she was just this world force. And so there was this constant clash, and finally Tina escaped, after 16 years of them being together.
Wow. I was watching a documentary on Ike particularly, and the couple of the individuals in the documentary that were being interviewed spoke about, I guess they kind of had took issue with how he was portrayed in the media, I guess with the movie that came out some years ago, and maybe just all of the press after that. But many of them spoke to the fact that they felt the portrayal of how he was portrayed in the media caused him ultimately depression and ultimately death towards the end of his life. Is that true to your research that you came up with?
It's a fascinating question. I refer to the arc of Ike's life as a spiritual tragedy. Because it's not that, how do I put this? He is capable of seeing and understanding that he's doing wrong, right? He just doesn't have the will to admit that he's wrong. And so he chooses not to change his behavior. So the press and everything else are external pressures which have an effect, right? But in the end, it's like, who are you, and who do you choose to be in relation to all the external pressures? So yeah, I mean, obviously, like Tina underwent a crazy kind of stress from the press. I mean, even after she had this incredible courage, essentially the proto Me Too movement, to tell her story about how she escaped Ike's patriarchal grip and his abuse. The press just continued to ask her to bring up these dramatic stories and part of her life, year after year. Can you imagine going through something like that honestly, I imagine all one would want to do is move on from, but everywhere you go in the public eye, it's people are asking you about this intimate partner violence. And so my point is, she went through a lot of that stress, but overall was incredibly graceful, and has maintained her dignity and herself and her spirit through all of it. And it was much because, I would contend, because she decided to take care of her spirit. Obviously it takes a village. It takes the people who loved her. It takes Erwin, her husband, who she eventually met and is still living with in Switzerland. But it also took her decision to be like, I have to protect my spirit. I have to leave this situation. I have to heal myself and find another place. And Ike had the same decision to make, but he could never get past the wall of just the admitting one's wrongfulness. Which is really sad.
I know I'm hearing you talking, and I'm seeing it through the lens, obviously, of the Tina musical, the story of Tina Turner and her Ike. But I can't help but to see the bigger picture and how this could be something that's really plaguing us as Black men and women in our society today, where you see women who are usually very open to spirit and improving and connecting, whereas men are, like you say, he saw his wrong but couldn't admit. Do you see a parallel in our culture as Blacks with that story?
Yeah, you won't be surprised with my academic background. I'm always wary of generalities, and I always attempt to lean toward the nuance. You know what I mean? Because no particular race has a monopoly on these kind of foibles. right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But to think specifically about Black men, right? It's like, what do we live in the face of? Uh, which is a lot of what I contend with in playing Ike, you know, which is like, I mean, there has been a centuries long campaign like against the image of Black men in the American psyche to paint us as a lot of different particular things, right? Violent, lazy, shiftless, irresponsible, bad fathers, sexually aggressive, right? Like all of these things, and a lot of it is aimed at destroying the sort of center of our spiritual manhood to keep us down, you know, which is why, like, so you can imagine. So, for instance, for Ike, one of his first, like, most famous record was called Rocket 88, and he recorded it, I think, when he was 20 years old, and it ended up like selling like 500,000 copies, or it was either like that many copies or that many plays on the radio, that kind of thing, you know. And all he got for it was $20.
Wow.
Because essentially the white folks who set up the contract, like, took him for his ignorance at the time, you know, and not knowing the whole setup of the industry, right? Which is a very patriarchal thing to do. It's a play off of people's ignorance to hold on to power and to keep them subjugated, right? So when Ike met Tina, you know, he was like, okay, I've learned how to play this game from the white patriarchs who fucked me over. Sorry, I don't know if I can cuss. Right?
Oh, good, you good.
But basically, right? And so he said, okay, so I'm going to copyright Tina's name and all of our stuff, so I will own it, right? And so he took something in a way that he was subjugated and then passed that to her, right? Now, do we give him a pass on that because of it? No. It's it's a terrible thing to do, to like force a woman into that position and to take advantage of her. But do we understand like what he was up against being a Black man in America, as to like how he was learning to mete out his own masculinity in this way? Yeah, like it, you know, it was learned. And on top of, like, it was just this racist culture that makes you feel like you constantly have to fight back, right? And so how do we,
here's the
as
question,
Black men, cull out our own sense of dignity in the midst of this sort of like continuous maddening situation of people trying to keep us down, trying to pull the rug out from under our manhood, trying to paint us in a certain kind of way? Look, I'll tell you this, it ain't easy. That's what I've been,
for sure.
That's what I've been learning, for sure. Yeah.
But there has to be, I guess, more attention to how to develop practices, ways of handling oneself and dealing yet with the things that we have to contend with. You know what I mean? And I know that takes sometimes maturity that sometimes we don't want to display. You get what I'm saying? Sometimes we want to be immature and just take it to the streets.
Yeah, well, no, but let me jump in here, because this ties directly back to what we were talking about earlier. It obviously certainly takes maturity, but it also takes a critique that takes into account colonialism
Mm.
and imperialism, right? And structural racism, and like toxic masculinity as prescribed by like the founders and like the
Mm.
actual folks who created this capitalist system, right? Which was like not us. You know what I mean? It links to the Black radical imagination that we were talking about, right? We have to like leave room and space for struggling with these like systemic critiques in relation to like our personal machinations day to day, you know, because so much of it just gets pinned on us, right? Pick yourself up by your own bootstraps. What's wrong with you? You know what I mean? Like why can't you just act right? The power of positive thinking, you know, just take a therapy class and you should be fine. Like just bend your own will and suddenly you'll be like a good Black man. But it's like, whoa, nigga, how about all these systems that are constructed to drive us crazy? Like can we critique those and not just me? You know what I'm saying? I think it has a lot to do with that for sure.
Absolutely. Great point. Great point. Listen, you have, as you stated, been on Broadway and you premiered as, I don't know if that's the right word. You were the first to
I made my debut.
Debut. That's right. You did your debut in Thoughts of a Colored Man. Speaking of colored men, but your emotion, I guess, and I want you to go into what the whole setup of that Broadway play. But I understand that you presented anger as the emotion. I guess there were 7 different emotions. Break down the Thoughts of a Colored Man and your relationship with that production.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, Cornell. Listen, the things that God does in life. When I tell you, I can't even. How can I get the people to understand how much what I have done, quote unquote, is not about me? And I feel like I am just called in a direction, and God be like, "Okay, this is where we going next," and I'll be like, "Okay, bet." Like,
right. Sometimes you just be like, you just want to be like, "Okay, hold on, can I just get used to this real quick?"
Crazy. A very short example before I get to Thoughts of a Colored Man was my first show that I booked after grad school in New York City. So I finished grad school in London in 2014. Then I moved to New York and I just started auditioning. First show I ever booked was called Acapella the Musical. Remember I was talking about the church group I grew up in. I went to the Church of Christ.
No
it's just
music,
a Protestant
that's right.
group. Yeah. All acapella. Grew up listening to a professional acapella group connected to the COC, Church of Christ, that was just called Acapella. Acapella the Musical that I did in the New York Musical Theater Festival in 2015 was a jukebox musical of acapella, that professional Christian acapella group that I grew up listening to the music to.
Wow.
I'm talking about, I just happened to show up in New York and go to this audition, and it's all these songs. And I was like, I was singing bass for the show. I got hired and I did the bass line for all these songs that I've been listening to growing up. And it's like,
wow.
I'm on 42nd Street, 42nd between 10th and 11th, doing this Christian acapella show. I was like, okay, God, what's next? Well, part of the answer was thoughts of a Colored Man. So I originated the role of anger in Thoughts of a Colored Man in the out of town tryout. The world premiere in Syracuse Stage and Baltimore Center Stage in 2019, towards the end of 2019. It's written by Keenan Scott II, directed by Steve Broadnax III, both incredible Black brothers who I had the pleasure of working with. So it takes place over one day in Brooklyn. There are 7 men on stage. The cast is entirely Black men, and each of the characters is named after emotions, like you were saying. So you have to love, lust, happiness, depression, wisdom, anger, and passion are the 7 characters. And I played anger. who was an ex-athlete. He was a basketball player who was trying to make it to the league, but he got hurt. And so now he teaches kids in school. And so much of the show was told through spoken word poetry. So Keenan Scott II, when I was in Atlanta at those poetry slams, he was, up in New York City going to these different clubs and poetry slams and whatnot. And when he ended up writing this play, he put a lot of that poetry in it. So it'll either be a poem or like a direct address monologue, just, in prose, just like speaking to the audience, or there'll be like realism, like actual scenes. And all three of those are woven together to make this beautiful, like panoramic tapestry of Black life right now for Black men. It's an amazing play. Go online, look up Thoughts of a Colored Man, buy the script. You know what I'm saying? It's available. It's so beautiful. So again, God, how else can I write this? I played basketball. I was going to play basketball at Emory University until my freshman year. I decided not to, and then I started writing a bunch of poetry. Suddenly, I'm playing as a basketball player. I literally have a dribbling solo on stage that I worked into the show because I originated the character. And I'm using all of these skills back to Langston Hughes of the performance of poetry. After the year and a half of no theater because of the pandemic, I get a call from my manager that's like, yo, Thoughts of a Colored Man is transferring to Broadway and they want you to move with it. When I tell you, we had 10 people in the cast in Syracuse and Baltimore. They only kept 2 people out of the whole cast. One was my mentor, Forrest McClendon, who was a Tony nominee. So they keep him, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then they kept me. And on Broadway, I understudied 4 roles. And I got to go on 10 times for 3 different roles. And I got to play Anger twice on Broadway and do my original track in the show that I originated. So it was out of this world. When I tell you it was out of this world, I mean, it was literally Black Broadway history because it was the first play ever on Broadway to be acted by, directed, written, and lead produced entirely by Black men. Brian Moreland and Ron Simons were our lead producers. And I'm talking about Angela Bassett came to our second preview, came backstage like, y'all, that was powerful. I mean, Michael Eric Dyson came and did like Q&A after the show. It was wild. I was like, how am I here? I literally think just because I decided to like follow what God has for me. Truly.
That's so good, and you said so much, and I have to bring one element out because I was on a previous podcast, maybe about 6 or 7 episodes ago. Now I was talking about purpose and how people often look at purpose as this one grandiose idea of what they're supposed to do with their life. And one day I was just, in my own meditation, my own time, and I was like, you know what? I think we have the wrong concept of purpose. I think purpose to me, and how I explained it in that episode, and I just want to see how you connect with this. Purpose to me is an individual following God's unction in the moment. So if your purpose right, if you feel God leading you to, i.e. basketball back in Emory University, and you practicing and your game and getting yourself tight, but then you decide to go a different way, not knowing that skill of basketball was going to come up on Broadway in a musical in a play that you had no idea. You get what I'm saying? So that the connection of what you felt led to do in that moment, however many years ago, tied to the purpose that now God had for you on the. So I guess in my thought is purpose is not just one isolated thing that, I'm supposed to do this and this is what it is. It's a connection of various things that you're supposed to do in order to, one, develop and fulfill your purpose here on the earth. I'm curious, being a great example of God moving you and having you go here and do this, and now setting you on the stage in this way, but using the skills that you developed back here. What is your thought on that concept? Am I off with this thought?
Yo, Cornell, first of all, you're brilliant. Second of all, I'm here for it, brother. I'm picking up what you're putting down. Okay,
I can see you. You can't even keep your seat. You just
no. Okay, let's get into it.
Like a Sunday morning type situation.
so what's wonderful about what you're constructing here, is a definition of purpose, is this prepositional phrase at the end, in the moment. You know what I'm saying? Because it disentangles purpose from this idea of destiny, I would say, right? Or even this idea of solidity, like it can only be one thing, that it opens up the purview of purpose,
Mm-hmm.
to take into account our ever-changing selves. And I think that's beautiful, particularly like as it sort of skirts away from the like manifest destiny, or as I would contend, bankrupt concepts like the American dream. You know what I mean? It's like, this is not what it's about. In fact, whatever we view as our purpose must needs be wide enough, deep enough to hold all of these different possibilities along the way. And that really, it really resonates, because yeah, it's like if like myself, like being a follower of Christ, like I think a lot of my purpose is inscribed into who I am as a person, like nature, not nurture, like the things I can't get away from, like the fact that I feel I always have a connection to joy at any point in my life, and I feel like it's not, I didn't do anything to make it happen. You know what I mean? It's just something about who I am that, like, almost at any moment I can tap into this like bottomless well of joy that I just carry around with me. And it's crazy, because it'll be like, I'll be like, my wife and I will be in the middle of a difficult argument or discussion, and it'll still be there. Or we'll be in rehearsal and it'll be this hard moment of trying to figure all these things out, and all these different things swirling around, and it's still there. And so I think that has a lot to do with my purpose, in terms of like sharing that joy with people, or unlocking it in certain situations, or in other people. But like, there are so many different ways that can be done. Another way that I've begun to conceptualize my own purpose has a lot to do with dreaming, actually. Yeah, which is trying to, shall we say, inspire people to dream differently. And I think so much of our culture is built on this kind of rugged individualism, that when we even ask about, like, what do we want our lives to be, or like, what do you want to do, or yeah, who do you want to be, like all of those kind of things. We so often think of in like quite a singular viewpoint, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, particularly in like the sort of strict context of capitalism, that those questions are often employed. Who do you want to be when you grow up? A fireman. Like, of course it's going to be, a career, right? But it's like, but what does that really have to do with purpose? Should our purpose be constitutive to a career? Like, I don't think mine is. Even though I think I'm doing the career that God would have me do, I don't think that's like my purpose, right? You know what I mean? I think there's so many things like to love people daily, and to learn to love better as I grow and as I mature, and to learn what that means. And then getting back to what I was saying earlier, instead of this singular viewpoint, I want us to dream collectively, or to even in our like dreaming about who we are, what we want to do, which is that the individual, right? I want us to see that in the context of a society. It gets back to this sort of systemic critique that I was talking about. It's like, what, like, who do you want to be? I want to be someone who like is part of a movement that like brings more resources to more people around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would like,
Yeah.
like instead of like dreaming about the house we want to have or like all that kind of thing. And this is again not to go against, making personal goals or that kind of thing. But yeah, it's something that I hope for us overall.
Yeah. But I think what you're saying, we have to develop our radical imagination as pertains to not only ourselves individually, but as a community, as you stated, seeing just far beyond the superficial of what you're gonna. And some of that is because of the system. We often are thinking of, but that's how we're gonna feed our family, what we're gonna do for our, four walls and who reside in them. You know what I mean? But we have to take it beyond that in order to really see a systemic change and generational blessing, if you will, upon our community. So, man, we could go on and on. Listen, I'm enjoying our time together. But I'm wondering, as a Black man in a public profession such as entertainment, do you feel obligated to be a role model or example for this generation?
We don't need another hero.
Oh, that's a good. For y'all that don't know, that's a Tina Turner classic. But go ahead.
That's right. Listen, come see the Tina Turner musical, and get your blessing. But that's one of her songs. And I think she's so right. Oh man, Janelle Monáe has a line about this in one of her songs on Dirty Computer, which is one of my favorite albums as well. I'll look it up later. But yeah, it's like I'm less invested in being a role model. Oh, even the word model gets to me. I'm like, I know a lot of models. I've done some modeling myself. It's not what I aspire to. You know what I mean? I'm like trying in as clarion a way as possible to see what Jesus is up to in the world and in me. And if that has the residual effect of someone being like, oh wow, like I appreciate the example that Garrett is setting, then okay, but like I'm not here. No.
Yeah.
Because here's the other thing that all of that ties into, or can easily, is like celebrity culture, which is a whole nother discussion. We don't have to get into that. But it's what capitalism likes to do, is to create class / caste systems, and here's this people who are in this group up here, and they're roped off by these stanchions, and they're different than these other people, and it's a lot of BS. There's a lot of ways of separating each other. So I'm much more about like this like peer review model. Honestly, I look to so many of my friends and I'm just continually inspired by them, and what I learn and hear from them pour into me and make me who I am, and then I might have an idea that pours into someone else. It's, as won't surprise you, it's a more communal thing than just being about me.
Yeah, for sure. You talked about your joy earlier, and you have a statement that, and I quote you, I'm a Jesus loving free Black man who believes both joy and righteous indignation are tools for liberation. How so?
Because it's so necessary, because Jesus went up in the temple with a whip and was like, y'all folks need to get out of my Father's house, right? So he didn't shy away from anger, right? I.e. righteous indignation. Things should make us mad. We look around the world and we see how things work, and we're going, wow, these people are making $8 an hour, doing all of the hard work that makes this massive corporation run. And then these people up here are getting $500,000 a year, sitting behind the desk, typing things in, like setting up meetings and stuff. Like, who decided that these people are worth so much less? And we could say, well, it's their job. Oh, but in a capitalist system, it is constituent to your personhood, actually. What is your actual value? You can't get away from that, right?
That's right.
You can look up someone's net worth, right? Like, And that's a very real thing. And so like if we start to like ask those questions and look around, I think we should absolutely be mad. But and that anger can be a really useful tool to push someone towards like, how do we correct this, right? But thusly also can joy. You know what I mean? And it's so necessary to have in concert, because if you're just burned out by always being pissed off about stuff, then you're not going to have the kind of spirit that you need to take care of yourself and other people while doing the work.
Yeah.
So like, we gotta have the joy. And where do we get it? We get it from family. We get it from, from friends and real connection, and deepening that, and like encouraging each other. So yes. Yeah. And I will say the first part of that sentence I stole from Cornell West. I don't shy away from but being a Jesus loving free Black man, it's just a true statement that he happened to phrase in a particular way. And I'll take it. I say amen to that.
Amen. Well, brother, we've talked about and covered many Black male figures, some historic like Langston Hughes, Dr. King, and some current, like you just mentioned, Dr. Cornell West, and even Keenan Scott II, playwright of Thoughts of a Colored Black Man. I have to ask the question of you, and this will be our closing question to bring it all together. Why do Black men matter?
Wow. Because we're beautiful, because God made us, because of how we love and by whom we're loved, because the world needs us. You know what I mean? Like, because we are essential to the ethos of creation. Because I'm speaking within the American context, after undergoing centuries of oppression, what we didn't do here in the United States was formulate a Black KKK and burn the nation to the ground. But instead, how we responded was with a lot of soul and a lot of spirit, and nonviolent protests, and like finding a way to to really like essentially believe in humanity when we had a lot of reasons not to. So you better believe we matter.
Absolutely. Well, brother, I gotta let you go. As great as this conversation has been, but before I let you go, I want to play this quick game with you. It's called My 5 Favorites. What it is, I'll give you 2 options, and then you tell me which is your favorite of the 2. Ready?
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I think you already answered this one, but I'll ask it anyway. Reading or writing?
Writing.
Game night or movie night?
Oh, game night.
Being a Southern boy, I got to ask you this one. Pinto beans or collard greens?
Wow, this is a sacrilegious question. My dad would say pinto beans, but I would say collard greens.
All right. Evening show or matinee?
Oh, evening.
And last one, Will Smith or Chris Rock?
I'm dead.
That's so layered. That's so layered, right?
Oh, it is. You gotta have me back for a part 2 to just talk about this all day. And listen, Jada. All day.
I love it. I appreciate you joining me, Garrett. Tell our listeners how they can connect with you, catch you in the musical Tina, and learn about more of what you have going on.
Yeah. If y'all want to look me up online, I'm on Instagram at Garrett M. Turner. Garrett has 2 R's and 2 T's, just so you know. Garrett-turner.com if you want to look at my website. And then I'm playing Ike Turner in the first national tour of the Tina Turner musical, up through September. So y'all come out, look it up online. You'll find it at Tina Broadway on Instagram. And come get some inspiration from this incredible story.
Absolutely. Well, Garrett, I appreciate you joining me, sir.
Amen. Thank you so much, Cornell. This has meant so much. I really appreciate you.
Well, this has been the Build on Beauty podcast, where beauty is born skin deep. I'm your host, Cornell Jermaine. Until next time, let your soul be made whole. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Build on Beauty podcast. For more information about our host, please visit cornelljermaine.com.